Welcome to the shop, and in this episode we are going to unpack the conflict between Cornbread and Jasmine. So we're going to talk about the difference between the character on television and the person behind the character, how the editors went out of their way to portray both characters as ambivalent, and what really happened and why. A challenge designed to manipulate the outcome, the Cryptiques, and at the end the confessional chart and the speculations as usual. So, first of all, in episode 2 we talked about a possible conflict between Jasmine and Deja. That's because at some point Jasmine got a mismatched confessional in which she was worried about Deja's performance, only to make it all about herself later on and how better she was. That was not to foreshadow a conflict, it was done to start putting a seed of what will be Jasmine edit. That was character development. And one last thing, someone noticed that Cornbread had kind of magical makeup back in episode 3 when everybody was having mirror moments. So what happened in there? What I think is that Cornbread had different moments. We don't know exactly the dynamic of it, but I think they tried to condense it together for having a more clear narrative, if you know what I mean. So let's begin the review by talking about what I like to call character baiting. So in episode 1, when I was discussing what I was expecting from this season, I said that the season was rushed. They produced 1,000 different seasons back in 2021. I thought we would get flattened characters. The point is that when World of Wonder is in full control for the U.S. season, it actually looks like they're putting some effort into it. If you remember back in season 13, I talked for the first time about ambivalent edits. At the time I didn't know what it was. I just know that there was some ambivalence in the way Rosé, Elliot and Tina Burner were edited, and I speculated, well, maybe this is a new kind of edit. But we will have to see until future seasons if we want to confirm this. What do I mean by ambivalent character? Well, first of all, let's make it clear that there is a difference between people and characters. While filming, the producers try to get as much conflict as possible between the people who are actually on set. And once they have the raw material, then they can edit them to create the characters that we see on television, which are characters that can have basically no resemblance or almost no resemblance to the person who was actually filming the season. So they can edit all of this raw material, create dynamics based on real events that maybe necessarily didn't happen, or even change the meaning of it. When they used to edit characters before, we used to add this villain versus victim dynamic, and it worked very well. But the problem is that it was kind of static. So what is the next logical step? Well, when you have a conflict between two people, make it unclear. Shade the line in between, show some information that is supporting of both sides, because you achieve two great purposes. Number one, you give the character depth. But number two, you maximize engagement on social media, because basically you give information to two different factions that confirm their point of view and will end up endlessly fighting online between each others. And this generates more engagement, more publicity, more money. It's a tactic. You know, when we talked about the Butterface channel, I talked about comment baiting, how you put false information in a video only because you want people to come to the comments and correct you. And that maximizes engagement. Now, character baiting is the same exact thing. It's just on a totally different level. And this, I think, is what has been happening this episode, confirming the fact that the editors are getting smarter over time. After analyzing this episode, I came to a conclusion. The ambivalence in the editing was by choice, but the edit helped Cornbread much more than it helped Jasmine. And we're going to see many examples of that. Cornbread's critiques of Jasmine are all valid, but at times she really goes out of her way to just shit on Jasmine. Jasmine is trying, this is what I saw, but she is also producing herself a little, just like everybody else. So I have no idea why Cornbread got so fixated on her when you have Lady Camden right there, and she is possibly the most produced of them all. So I don't know, maybe something happened behind the scenes, you know, there are other reasons, I don't know about that. But I can tell you one thing, if Jasmine is the new villain, she is 22, and being self-absorbed, I don't think it doesn't really warrant what comes with a villain edit. I mean, at that age, it's also kind of normal to be self-absorbed. You cannot have the maturity of a 50-year-old man at 22. So before we begin the review, please remember, these two people are people. They have different ages, they have different personal stories, so however you decide to look at this, make a difference between the characters on television and the real people outside in the real world. Let's begin. We are back in the workroom and we're going to set the narrative for this episode. So Orion asks, Any safe queens thinks that they should have won, and at this point Jasmine answers, explaining herself. And we have the first example of Cornbread being in the producer's favor, because they allow her to set the narrative for Jasmine.
Like, some of the reasons why I'm in, like, Save.
I'm a person who talks a lot, but when I talk, I have conversations. Miss Jasmine don't do that.
This narrative is also confirmed by Bosco, who comes, again, through a confessional, telling us
Drag Race is a very stressful situation. We all cry at inopportune times. But to quote somebody very wise, a lot of emotion for safe.
this moment already primes you on the main narrative for the episode. Now, the only thing that we are left to be doing is confirming this narrative later on, and then we can start bringing some ambivalence to make it more interesting. It's a new day in the workroom. Jasmine points who the richest bitches are, which are Carrie and Willow, and then corrects herself, adding that, oh, Cornbread is there too.
Do you feel richer?
Yeah? Oh, I am richer. Oh my gosh.
Y'all two are the richest bitches in between us now.
Oh, period.
Oh, and Cornbread too, sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say, speak for yourself, bitch. Hold the fuck up.
For me, it's no wonder that she forgot, because she wasn't even there in the premiere one when Cornbread actually won. But we don't really have time to think about that, because while Jasmine talks about herself, we have Cornbread bitch-facing, Carrie calling Jasmine for talking too much, and at some point Jasmine herself confirms the narrative. She said, yes, it's true, I talk too much. Orion also jumps in and confirms that yes, Jasmine talks too much. At this point, Cornbread intercepts the conversation and clarifies the problem for Jasmine. It's not just that you talk too much, it's that you talk too much, and on top of that, you're not even having a conversation. You just talk, and if you talk like that, you are not even listening because you are too busy talking to yourself. It is a fair feedback to give. At this point, the edit gives us also some examples, because we have a throwback to Untucked, and then we are shown Jasmine actually interrupting Cornbread multiple times, giving literal examples of what Cornbread just said. And to tie it all together, we have a confessional of Angeria confirming everything that Cornbread was saying. The editing is telling a clear story. Jasmine talks too much and ends up making it all about herself, maybe even producing herself a little bit. While Cornbread makes a fair and educational point that is basically confirmed by everyone, even Jasmine. And this, for me, is a second example of the producers kind of playing in favor of Cornbread, because they do everything they can to confirm her narrative. We have no real appreciation for Jasmine admitting her faults, receiving a feedback and just saying, yes, it's true, I do that. We have no attention to the fact that Jasmine is young, that things like this cannot be simply learned in a day. You cannot just ask for the impossible, you need to be patient with it. But we don't see anything of that through the editing. It's not that Jasmine is young and naive. She is stupid at best and disingenuous at worst. Now that we have this narrative set in stone, it's time to bring some ambivalence, to do some character bait to the audience and make it all more spicy, because we want those people fighting online, don't we? At this point, RuPaul is back, we have no mini advertisement, and the girls are divided into two groups for the Maxi challenge. Maddie and Willow gets to choose who they want in their team, and Jasmine ends up being the last one to be chosen, so she gets to choose her own team. And she chooses the team with Cornbread. She says,
I haven't worked with a lot of the girls yet, so I want to work with them.
Well, go on now.
When she comes back later on in a confessional, she's going to tell us a different story. Now, what do I think about this? It was like a 50-50 situation. This is what I generally think. Because on one hand, I do believe when Jasmine comes later on saying, well, I was trying to challenge myself. And I do understand why you wouldn't directly say it in the workroom. But also, it would have been a great way to produce a little nice redemption storyline for herself. The problem is, if she was really trying to produce herself, it really backfired big time, because self-producing only works if the producers and the other queens are all on board with it. I mean, look at Lady Camden, for example. She really is the most produced of them all, but you don't see it. Have you ever asked yourself why? Because everything is working in her favor. Otherwise, they would have called her out episode 1. At this point, we go back to the table because it's time to introduce some ambivalence. So we have a confessional from Jasmine explaining the real reason why she decided to join their team.
I still choose being on her team because I feel like I need to prove to her and those girls that I'm a team player when it comes to teams, and I'm not going to try to overrun people.
And then at the table, she actually explains how she came up with a solution for her problem. So she's going to shut the fuck up, she's going to be taking notes, and she's going to be the last one to talk so that she's sure that she will not interrupt anybody. And I think this is really a good effort because it shows initiative, it shows that you are receptive to feedback, you are actually looked for a solution in order to solve this problem that was pointed out by other people about you. For me, this is a genuine effort to actually overcome this talking too much that Jasmine actually has. The problem is that you have Cornbread bitch-facing while she talks, plus she comes in a confessional, basically calling her effort bullshit. How else can I say it? We started under the idea that there was a clear narrative in here. Jasmine talks too much, she is pissing everybody else, and, you know, Cornbread is calling her out. Now we go to the exact opposite, because we see Jasmine actually putting effort to solve the problem, and Cornbread is simply shitting on her. And this is the irony of it all. While Carrie is talking, Cornbread actually interrupts Carrie in order to come for Jasmine. And she tells her, if you write, you're not listening, which is a valid feedback, but a feedback that nobody really asked for. It really looks like she went out of her way just to come for Jasmine, just to push her down while she was down. And to reinforce this narrative, we also have a confessional from Bosco, calling out Cornbread.
I was wanting to do kind of like a very Kim Kardashian West character, super dramatic. I want to like...
Carrie, pause, 2 seconds. Sis, if you're right, that means you're not paying attention to what the group is talking about.
I think Cornbread comes into this moment and just being pissed at literally anything Jasmine is doing. Like, stop breathing over there. I see you blinking and it's taking up a lot of room.
The editors could have cut out this whole scene. This is something that you have to understand. All of this could have been easily cut out. Instead, they show it to us. They confirmed it by having Bosco coming in with a confessional. And at the end of the day, we are left with an ambivalent perception about what is really happening in the workroom, because we started from one side, we ended up in the totally opposite one. At this point, Jasmine tries to explain her idea, because she has an idea for her character. She wants to have an over-talking character. I think this is an admirable gesture as well, because she's basically trying to take a disadvantage, which is her talking too much, and turn it into an advantage, which is a great way to deal with your problems anyway. If in your life you find a way to take everything that doesn't work and turn it into something that becomes your strength, then you really won the lottery of life. Jasmine explains her idea, Cornbread intercepts and elaborates on the idea, and then tells her very condescendingly, this is probably something you can write down on your little notebook.
What if you're talking a mile a minute? This is the part where you can write down in your little notebook.
Yes.
Girl.
And this is completely unwarranted. I'm like, where is this coming from? Yes, maybe Cornbread was pissed that Jasmine chose the team in order to produce herself a little redemption story arc, but this is really turning into direct attacks that I don't honestly understand where they are coming from. Nevertheless, Jasmine doesn't pick on the provocation, tries to intercept on the conversation, and then excuses herself because she interrupted Cornbread again.
What if you're talking a mile a minute? This is the part where you can write down in your little notebook.
Yes,
girl, so we can
I
all
was
get on the same
thinking
page.
to start off like how you said that, like I'll ask.
I was about to.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And at this point, we have Lady coming in a confessional, reinforcing the fact that we are witnessing a conflict between the queens in the room. Yeah, I know, it's messy. It's really messy. So at this point, Jasmine resumes explaining her idea, and Cornbread seems to provoke her again.
Are you in character right now, or are you explaining?
What the hell is happening in there? The point is, we don't know. There is really no way to tell. A ton could have been cut out, reaction shots could have been added in, but the edit, and this is the important thing, the edit makes it look as if now Cornbread is the villain. So in a matter of 10 minutes, we established a narrative and then turned it around 180. Now, what do I think about this situation? Personally, I think that Cornbread was just pissed at Jasmine because she tried to produce herself and she basically interrupts everyone not leaving room for anybody in there. It looks like initially she tried to help her, but it's not working, and it looks like she is like very frustrated from the situation. The problem is you cannot really knock people down when they try and then be so sensitive about their mistakes. For me, that kind of change that she is asking to Jasmine, it's not really something that comes like from a moment to another. It goes through multiple cycles of trying, making mistakes, getting feedback, trying again, making mistakes again. I mean, if you want to help a person like that, you also have to be ready to bear the weight of helping, because really helping is hard. It's not just something that comes off easy, it's hard work. And if you cannot bear that weight, you shouldn't really help. I know how it sounds, but that's the truth, because if you are not ready to bear the weight of it, you can end up making more damage by actually discouraging a person when she's trying. I mean, I still like Cornbread. I saw the live at Roscoe, so now I have an explanation as to why she seemed to go off for no apparent reason. So it's as if her mind played a trick on her and moved the responsibility of everything on the fact that Jasmine might be calculating and disingenuous, instead of the fact that you tried to help, but your help was simply not enough. You didn't have the mental strength to give the help that was needed from you. For me, this is the explanation that makes the more sense, because how the hell could Jasmine be so calculated and disingenuous and then end up giving this easy confirmation by keeping interrupting everyone? This is the most stupidest thing. Somebody gives you a critique and you basically confirm that critique. How, that's not really the behavior of someone that's calculating. So at the end of the day, the producers saw a conflict and they thought, you know what, maybe we can do our best to fuel it and make the most out of it in editing, because after all, you gotta make the season interesting. Moving on to filming, for some more confusion. We have Cornbread, Jasmine and Carrie ready to film their mirror scene for the Maxi challenge. And we have a confessional of Jasmine feeling insecure because of what happened during the table talk. And we are also intercepted by a mismatched confessional from Cornbread talking as if she made up with Jasmine, as if the conflict was actually resolved. But it wasn't, because the second confessional, the one to the right, I don't know where it comes from, but it doesn't come from this episode. So what the hell is going on? After the premise that we had before, first with Jasmine being the villain, then with Cornbread being the villain, at some point the editors tie it all together by trying to bring a more emotional side to both of them, exactly during this scene. The day of the challenge, the runway and the main stage, is actually another day. It was filmed the day after. At some point, Cornbread came back to her senses, and after sleeping on it, she seems like she genuinely resolved her conflict with Jasmine. We have another confessional of Jasmine explaining for the 11th time why she decided to go to the other group. And while she's saying all of these things, you see Cornbread from the workroom saying, well, it's not that bad. And then we see another two mismatched confessionals with Cornbread putting emphasis on the fact that she made up with Jasmine. So the whole edit is telling you, yeah, the conflict is resolved. As you're watching this, you are thinking, the conflict is resolved, we are done. And I think that it was really resolved, because they were there the day after talking about it and everything was fine. But in a way, the producers seem to be not really willing to allow that to happen, because once we go to the main stage, Cornbread will be at risk of elimination, while Jasmine will be conveniently safe. And this is going to fuel the conflict again, and we're going to see the results in Untucked. Let's move on to the main stage, and let's discuss a little bit the runway and the challenge. Now, the runway, I gotta be honest, I didn't really understand what was the point of this runway. If it was to bring a dress that was as similar as possible to one of J.Lo's dresses, or if they had to interpret the dress, making it draggy, making it their own, but still being able to recognize what was the inspiration for it. So I don't know what was the purpose in here. From my point of view, they all look beautiful. With that said, if I don't know the criteria, I cannot judge them. I cannot get an opinion on who did better and who did worse. So for me, they all get 10s across the board and we move on immediately to the challenge. which is going to be challenging as well. Now, on one side, the challenge was a ton of fun, because this is what happens when you let the queens actually produce the script by themselves. They can put in their own thoughts, they can write their own scripts, and usually when the queens are allowed to do this, we get the most out of comedy challenges, because that's, for most of them, this is actually their job, and they're infinitely better than whoever is writing the acting challenges on Drag Race, because, you know, they are awful. They're awful. Whenever production produces a script, it's usually awful. When the queens do the job, it's usually a ton of fun, and this challenge was not different. What's my problem with this? Well, like the Runway, I have no idea how to judge this. They basically edited 1 to 2 seconds clip with a narration of RuPaul, music, a fast-paced editing. I almost struggle to understand what is really happening. What's happening? I don't know. I don't know. It's basically the producers doing whatever they want at this point, because when you have a 2 seconds clip, how can you use that to say, oh, this person was better, oh, this person was worse? I have no idea on how to judge them on this challenge. I just have a vague impression that I can tell you, for me, Deja, Maddie and Bosco seem to be the best to me, but mostly because I saw some of what they did during the rehearsal. If I had to judge just by the final product, well, there is not much to work with. And at the end of the day, they decided to judge all of these queens individually instead of teams. This is a teamwork. They should have been judged as a team, and if anybody was going to win, it should have been the team captain, the one that is basically leading everybody else. But we cannot have Maddie getting a win, and we also need Alyssa to be in the bottom, and she, you know, she's in the other group. So of course we're going to judge them individually. So at the end of the day, 3 queens that were the best for me, Deja, Maddie and Bosco, were all safe next to Jasmine. How curious of a choice. Archie, why do you think Maddie's funny moments had been edited out? Because she was not allowed to win. Georgia's was safe. She was born to do drag, nerdigans. I agree. She was born to do drag. Okay, should we move on to the Cryptiques?
Bullshit. 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 That's bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit.
That's a joke. Every fucking time. I was being realistic.
Realistic was bullshit? Girl, bullshit. You are a fucking liar.
Today's Cryptiques are sponsored by the U.S.C. Does online harassment make you sad? Did Lonnie Love pretend to come for you in exchange for a fat check? Well, guess what? We got a new soda for you. It's the U.S.C. Ingredients include sunshine, antidepressant, and the blood of Christ. The U.S.C. Consume it responsibly. So, on the main stage, we have Michelle, Ross, and Lonnie Love, also known as the holy composting trinity of RuPaul's Drag Race, so you know that we are in for an incredible load of bullshit already. But on the bright side, RuPaul was not baby-talking Willow, so I don't know, 50-50? I guess it's better than nothing. To Willow, Lonnie says she went all in, and yes, this is not a porn. Then she made her laugh out loud, and bringing back 1998 J-Lo is a talent. I don't know what this means. Then Ross, it's ridiculous, but if you can sell it, it works. And it worked for you. You are a little actress. Then Ross continues, she is soulful and she could break the mold. I agree, but what the fuck does this have to do with the challenge? She was not bad, but a lot of queens definitely did better. I don't know, sometimes Ross puzzles me. Then we move on to Michelle. The look is not top of mind, which apparently is a good thing. And you did it drag. How exactly did she make it drag? It's basically a one-on-one replica. What does she mean by she did it drag? I don't know. I have no idea. But what I find funny is that somehow when queens make it draggy, it usually means costumey for Michelle. Willow made it draggy, but it's not costumey. Get out of it, whatever you will, because I have no idea what the fuck is going on. Then for the performance, Michelle says she was great and she didn't see it coming. My god, how many do we have of this? 5. Okay, let me get some energy drink. Princess Rose, she hot glued 3 butterflies. Oh, okay. Let's move on to Cornbread. Ross, she looks beautiful and the dress is true to the inspiration of J-Lo's look. Translation, I like your interpretation of the look. So interpretation equals good. You have to interpret the dress on the main stage. Okay, for the performance, she's a powerhouse, but it's more powerful to use different gears. And at this point, we all know that clearly Ross started having sex with this car, because I don't find any other explanation for this analogy. Michelle, in the challenge, she was fun to watch, but she went in 100 and she wanted more texture and color. She's thinking about food. Michelle misread the catering memo instead of the production memo. She's clearly talking about food, texture, color, flavor maybe. Also, going in 100 is not good unless you are Georgios from episode 1. In that case, having slow crescendos, peaks and valley, in that case it's not good. You need to go 100%. It's funny how the judges cannot even manage to be consistent inside the same season. I mean, at some point, whoever is writing their critiques should be, you know, keeping track of all the bullshit that they say episode after episode. So if you jump in this season, at least they don't contradict each other's during different episodes. Where are we? Lani, you should do more than just one note food jokes. As if she basically made food jokes 5 episodes in a row. It didn't bother me. I had fun. It's RuPaul's Drag Race. What do you expect? Method acting? More than once in the past, we've been told, this is Drag Race, make it stupid, make it fun, don't overthink about it. Nobody is expecting Oscar-level acting when it's convenient. And you know that at the end of the day, Cornbread needs to think she's going to be in the bottom 2, because this is going to trigger her and fuel the conflict again against Jasmine that was safe. So at this point, Mamaru intercepts for some emotional porn. And she tells her, it's time for you to show some of the things that you are afraid to show. Translation, it's time to cry for the camera. And then she continues, it's not just for the competition, it's just for you. Did any of you watch Crazy Ex-Girlfriend? Because there is a song in there, and the song goes like, put yourself first for him.
Put yourself first for him, that's what you gotta do. Put yourself first for him.
It's a joke on female empowerment, you know. You should need to put yourself first, but for him. Get a tattoo on your back that you cannot even see just for yourself.
Just for yourself.
This sounds like the same exact thing. It's like Mamaru is like, cry for the camera. It's not just for the competition, it's just for yourself. So cue the emotional music, cue the motivational music, however you want to call it, playing in the background. Camera 1 is ready, and then Cornbread cries. She cries in front of the camera, just for herself.
Just for yourself.
And while Cornbread speaks, Mamaru is like, yes, yes, yes.
How much shit I've dealt with in my life, and I thought,
yes! Yes!
And the worst part of all of it is that in the background, they didn't cut the microphone off the judges. So you hear, I think it was Ross. While Cornbread is speaking, while Cornbread is crying, Ross is like, with zero empathy in the voice. Zero.
being able to talk to anybody.
Then Michelle comes in and says, no, baby, don't apologize for emotions. And I'm thinking, yes, baby, the camera loves you. Come on, bring all of these emotions. And then Mamaru, at the end, ties it all together by saying, this is the beginning of the healing, right here. Right here on RuPaul's Drag Race. This is what RuPaul's Drag Race does. It heals you. You don't need therapy. You don't need friends. You just need to be on Drag Race, and Drag Race will heal you. And then she continues, now let the healing begin, and let the water flow. Yes, Cornbread, let the water flow for the camera. Mamaru will be happy. So yes, I'm missing medicated RuPaul as well. Then we move on to Carrie. Ross, she pulled off the look, but she sees hesitation when it's time to be funny or vulnerable. You see, Carrie needs to cry. And for Ross, she felt flat. She has to commit to every challenge by challenging herself. Oh my god, look at Ross. He is getting his degree in psychology. Then we move on to Michelle. Is this a Jennifer's original dress? Making Ross look like an idiot as a consequence, because if this is the same dress, the only difference is the body of the person wearing it. I found it funny, I found it delightful. Then Michelle continues, you want to be beautiful, but you should have been ugly for the challenge. And if you let your guard down, you're going to go much further in this competition and in life. And somehow I'm thinking, how many times we heard the judges asking a queen to do something that's the opposite of who they are or the opposite of their style, and then the moment they do it, they go home immediately. Like, Carrie, get the fuck out of here. Did you get ugly? You're done. Get the fuck out. And then Mamaru says, you have a story to tell, Carrie. Don't be afraid to tell the story. Translation. Spill the beans during the mirror moments, Carrie. We are producing quality emotional pawns in here. You need to tell your story. Allow us to fall in love with you. This is the part that I find interesting, that RuPaul tells her, allow us to fall in love with you. If you're not sharing your story for the camera, then we cannot fall in love with you. Which is a funny thing to say when you think about it, because in real life I don't really need people to tell me their deepest, darkest shit in order for me to start caring about them. That's not how real life works. But this is how RuPaul's Drag Race work. In order to be loved, you need to air your shit for everybody to see it. And then Mamaru continues. The gold is in the vulnerability. Mrs. G, Ru is trying to make the girls have a mental breakdown for his benefit. Of course she is, why wouldn't she? This is a gold mine. Moving on to Deja. Ross. The performance was good, it felt natural, and the dress was a beautiful loose interpretation of the original. Michelle, she was believable, she was gorge takei, and I'm like, Michelle, shut the fuck up and don't you dare joke about Sulu. You cannot touch it to make a stupid pun just because you cannot think of anything to say. Then Lani, she's able to use different forms of comedy and she's not one note. Then RuPaul, she interpreted the outfit and made it work for her. Nothing else. This is all we get for Deja, because remember, she will not win. Moving on to Angeria. Ross. The ugly bitch line was a big swing, and she hit it. What's going on? What does it mean? Eli, it means hitting a home run in baseball. Oh, thank you, I had no idea. And then Michelle continues. She has no problem getting ugly and funny. Lani, the look is sexy and beautiful, and she came here to win. Mamaru, I believe every word, and I felt like you forgot the camera was there. When did you learn how to act? Angeria says, yesterday. Everybody has a good laugh, they tell her the look is gorgeous, and that's it for Angeria. They keep it quick, they keep it cute, and by the end of this, she's going to take the win home. And finally, we move on to Alyssa. Ross says, sounding like a fake $3 bill. I love this look. The reveal was pow and worked on stage. I couldn't agree more. The reveal was beautiful. The whole runway was beautiful. And then Ross continues, but the challenge felt in the trap of doing it at 100. You know, you gotta have those peaks and valleys. You gotta have those shades in color. Alyssa did it at 100. Then Michelle says, for the performance, I love that you were ready to go and wanted to go hard, but you got into high-pitched Jara Sophia and you got stuck there. Translation, you did the same thing too much. Lani, don't go for the obvious, go for something different. How many times already we were told go for the obvious, don't think about it too much, don't try to win an Oscar while doing this, be stupid, be funny, and have fun while you do it. But of course, these are all valid things if they work with the narrative. At this point, Alyssa breaks into tears, but there is an image of Ross desperately trying to pretend to be empathetic, and he really looks as if he is witnessing some kind of Bartholin cyst level of surgery. Alyssa is trying to explain, you know, that the acting challenge was difficult because there is a language barrier in there, that she wanted to do more. She wanted to bring the best that she could bring to it, but she is not allowed to elaborate, because immediately Mamaru intercepts her and stops her, because they couldn't give less of a fuck about her opening up on stage. They don't give a shit. She didn't become Willow's villain, so they have no use for her emotions on stage. She has no comforting words, no compliments for showing vulnerability, no encouragement for her effort to open up. We have none of that. Instead, RuPaul just cuts her short and said, yeah, you are fantastic, but it's about all of these nuances and shades and colors, and unfortunately we only saw one note. I really don't give a shit. It's good if you show vulnerability, but only if they have a use for you in the show. If you have to go home, nobody gives a shit about it. Oh, good lord. So, Jasmine was safe, Cornbread was conveniently at risk of being the bottom two, so she can be more frustrated and go down on Jasmine during Untucked. We are back in the main stage for our tops and bottom. So, Deja and Willow are high, Angeria wins, Cornbread is low, and Carrie and Alyssa are in the bottom two. Do these placements make any sense? I guess if you want them to make sense for you, they could make some sense, but I think Georges should have definitely been in the bottom, if only based on the fact that he said, I was sure that I was going to be on the bottom. So based on that, he probably should have been there. Should Alyssa have been in the bottom? I don't think so. I thought it was very convenient. Carrie as well. But then again, how do you judge all of this? Nevertheless, these are our placements, and we have to stick with it. Moving on to the confessional chart and speculation for this episode. Now, during the live, I went in great details on the different storylines, the different representation spots that we got used to. So if you're interested into more in-depth speculation, I will leave a link in the description to that. But for now, for this episode, we can see that Cornbread, Willow, Jasmine and Angeria were given the most confessional of them all. They are front and center, except Jasmine, who is front and center for all the wrong reasons. We talked about the editing already, how despite the fact that the producer tried to character bait a little bit what was happening between Cornbread and Jasmine, at the end of the day, Jasmine is the one with the clear villain edit for me. Everybody else basically faded in the background, but no one as much as Orion, Deja and Maddie. And while Deja might make sense, because for me and also for a lot of other people, she was one of the best in these challenges, so she should have popped off. Instead they just passed on the opportunity, and I think that she had little confessionals because of this, so that you wouldn't notice that much all the effort that she actually put in, which means they passed on Deja in order to give a bump on Angeria, which is something that you should keep into account. And the same seemed to have been happening for Maddie. Maddie was team captain. If her team was winning, usually what would happen is that as a team captain, she would get the win. But she didn't, and during the confessionals she almost had no time at all, as if we're putting her as well into the background so that you wouldn't notice her that much. Now, last episode we speculated that Bosco, Maddie, Orion and Lady Camden was the ones who really didn't have a storyline or whose storyline was already concluded. So considering the fact that Cornbread, Carrie, Orion and Maddie are the only queens still in the competition who had mirror moments, and also taking into account the fact that Bosco was basically the narrator of the conflict between Cornbread and Jasmine, and Lady Camden was given a ton of character development during Untucked, I would be confident in just keeping the speculations for next episode to Orion and Maddie. If you want also the speculations for the top 4, then you should go back to the livestream, because I'm really late on time as usual. I wanted to release part of this episode as an independent episode to discuss a little bit more in depth what was going on with Alyssa, and so yes, I'm short on time again. See you back on Sunday, same place, same times. Special thanks to our Patreons for supporting the channel, and if you would like to support us as well, there is a link for the Patreon in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great week.